Hi everyone, I'm Virginia from Right Clinic and I'm here today with Has. So we're the co-founders of Right Clinic and we're going to be answering your questions today on how to become a medical writer. So you guys sent in over 30 questions, so this will be a good long, about an hour or so. So hold your horses and yeah, let's get started.
So as mentioned, we're Has and Virginia. We're both UK qualified pharmacists now working as freelance medical writers. And we both live abroad and we regularly travel. So, we're doing what's something completely different from clinical work, which is fantastic. Virginia, do you want to expand some more about how you got into medical writing?
Yeah, so I think I started when I moved abroad, went from being a pharmacist in London for 7 years, and then came to Germany because my husband got a job out here. And then I got straight into remote work because I couldn't speak German, so I couldn't work as a pharmacist in Germany. And built my portfolio, then got into a medical communications agency for a year, got made redundant, then went into a digital health company, got made redundant. And now I'm full-time freelancing, and getting more into video creation with YouTube Health. So that's my journey in a nutshell. And obviously met Has and founded Right Clinic to help other people get into it too, and built a community on LinkedIn to almost 5,000 members now. So
Amazing. Yeah, my story is somewhat similar. So I was traveling, I was just backpacking Southeast Asia, but during the pandemic, I got stuck because the flights didn't let me go home. So I didn't know how to do, didn't know what to do to make money. And luckily, I have a laptop, so I got into medical writing. A friend told me about Upwork, started freelancing through then. And one thing led to another. I eventually got a job with a medcoms agency, got made redundant, and now I'm back to freelance medical writing full time. And it's been fantastic. We've both worked with quite a few different clients. So on the screen here are just the type of people who we've worked with, would be it through freelance or through agencies. And then as you can see, it's quite varied.
yeah, some of the highlights here are like the NHS, WebMD, Pharmacy Magazine, YouTube, As Online Doctor by Zava, Dr. Felix, Univadis, which writes everything to do with Medscape, Geeky Medics, which is the brain symbol, and Gymshark. So, it's a mixture between pharma and big organizations. So we asked you, why do you want to become a medical writer? And here are your responses. So we got about 83 responses, and most of you said you wanted to be a medical writer because you want to be your own boss and start your own business, which is in blue, or you want to work from home, or you want to travel, you want to earn extra income or get part-time work, and you want to have more time for yourself or have flexible working hours so you can choose what you do with your time. Some of you said you want to stay active during retirement, so you've got all of this amazing knowledge, but you want to have that extra income coming in even though you've retired from your clinical career. And some of you just want to change career to, also to try something new. And a couple of you wrote your own reasons, so almost all of the above or all of the above. And also trying to use your scientific and writing skills in a fulfilling job, and also to just gain additional career knowledge related to the medical sphere and progress in research skills. So quite a mixture of reasons, but it's a great reason to be here if you want to become a medical writer, because we're going to answer a lot of your questions about it.
So how do you become a medical writer? As we just said, we're here to answer your questions. The first one, I think we've just already answered very briefly. We're trying to keep it relatively short because we have quite a lot of questions to get through. And I'm sure that most of you probably understand our stories quite well now, given that if you've been following us for some time. So we'll jump right into the actual questions you guys have sent us. So which are the basic key elements to kickstart your medical writing? Well, for me, the main thing was actually time and, learning how to write. I had to give myself time to understand how to find clients. So people don't respond to you straight away. When you apply for a job, usually it takes a week, 2 weeks, sometimes longer. So you need to be able to give yourself time and your potential clients time to kind of get back to you and sort everything out. That's a really big thing. You also need to give yourself time to learn how to write. You don't learn how to write specifically as a medical copywriter in the space of a day. As healthcare professionals and scientists, we probably had a lot of experience writing in academia, but when it comes to writing online for different clients, the writing is actually very different from academia. You're writing towards a patient or healthcare professional audience that want to read something that's quite easy to digest. Even healthcare professionals want to read something that's easy to digest because they don't have time to sit there and try and decipher what it is you're trying to write half the time. So you just need to understand how to basically distill all this information that you're reading and translate it into something that's quite easy to understand, but still be quite comprehensive. And that's my two key things, really. And also time to research. With medical writing, you're writing on the back of research. You're not trying to plagiarize someone else's articles that you've read online. If you're writing an article about what to do if you have a sore back, do not read a Healthline article and reference that. If you are going to use a Healthline article, find the references they use, like the PubMed and the Lancet articles they use, and then try to understand the research yourself before writing it. Because otherwise, not all these articles are correct, although they are all reviewed by medical professionals. Some aren't. So if you end up, referencing the wrong article, you might end up going down a hole of plagiarism that is also incorrect.
Okay, so the next question is, how can I shift profession into medical writing? So depending on what you're doing right now, normally you have to build a portfolio as a first step. And as a second step, you need to network. And then as a third step, you need to make your presence known on social media and also invest in your learning as well. So whether that means spending time reading books, doing courses, and also practicing as well. So going out to work for people, even if it's a one-off project at a low rate, at least you're getting that relationship kind of exposure and communicating with the client. So you can say, I went and did this for this person and these are the results, and get a testimonial for your portfolio. So whether you have a healthcare background or not, then you can get into medical writing. And most of the time you are not going to be working on your own. You'll be working as part of a team, so your work will be reviewed. If you're working on your own as a freelancer and you produce your first draft, then that's usually reviewed by someone who gives you feedback anyway. So shifting profession means essentially taking those small steps in the beginning and then ultimately leading to the biggest step where you can totally go out of your previous career and full-time into medical writing. But the other thing is you don't need to be shifting everything from your current job to go straight into medical writing, especially at the beginning. We definitely recommend holding on to your current job and then slowly working out if medical writing is right for you and seeking out people's opinions and expertise and actually trying it out for yourself. So it takes time to build your portfolio and get your first client, especially as a beginner. But once you do that, then you can make the decision if you do want to quit your current job or current situation, then shift into medical writing full time.
So how do you pitch clients for medical writing? There's a few ways you could do this. I'll not go over every single one because it might be too long here, but I'll go through the main ones I use. So the first one is Upwork. A lot of people give Upwork some stick because it's a freelance platform that takes away, some of the money that you earn. But in the grand scheme of things, it's only 10%. And that 10%, if you think about it, it gives you a platform where all the clients are available. And it gives you a platform that actually manages your finances for you. It tells you what you've earned. It tells you what taxes you have to pay. And it tells you, everything is there. You can access any invoice you want. So I think it's worth the 10%. Secondly is LinkedIn. So understand how to look for certain comments that are, someone looking for a copywriter. So you can search in the search bar, looking for a copywriter, looking for a medical writer, and then you can filter it by latest and see who's posting something that's like, hey, my company is looking to work with a freelance medical writer. Is anyone available? And that way you can sort of, comment on the post, like, hi, I'm available. I've sent you a DM. Here's my portfolio. You can also look for different companies on LinkedIn that you might want to work with. So, for example, if you wanted to work with, let's say, Nike, you can type in Nike marketing managers or marketing directors, and you can, try and connect with them, introduce yourself to them, and just say, if you are looking to collaborate with any freelancers, please let me know. I am available, and if yes, then I'll send you my portfolio. Otherwise, it's nice to connect with you. And a lot of time people get back to you and say, oh, that's great, actually, we might be looking for someone in a couple of months. We'll keep you in mind. Another way is to look at newsletters. So there's a lot of newsletters that send regular jobs, both for freelance and full time. And what these newsletters do often is they search through Twitter and LinkedIn, and they look for the people who post the posts, which are like looking for a copywriter, etc. And they'll just send them to one bulk newsletter that you can click on. You have to pay for these newsletters, but it's worth the $3 or $4 that you pay every month, because then it gives you, 20 to 30 opportunities a day that you might have otherwise missed. And those newsletters are like, Right Jobs Patron or Sonia Weiser's email or All Things Freelance Writing. So there's so many. We can post a link to them on our LinkedIn.
Okay, so how do you find medical writing resources? So the number one place that you should be looking for resources is actually our group on LinkedIn. So the whole reason for creating the group back in 2021 was because I was looking to get into medical writing and couldn't find any information. So I thought if I could put it all in one group and invite people, that it would help other people who are in the same situation as me and looking to get into medical writing, maybe because they have moved abroad or they want to switch career or they just want an extra bit of income. And so the medical writing for beginners and beyond group, free resources and friendly advice on LinkedIn. So as I said before, we have almost 5,000 members. Everything in there is free and it's a very active group. And we advertise things like our webinars and free ebooks and free events and things like that. So that should be the number one place that you go to. And anywhere else will be a Google search, normally with societies like MWA or AMWA, and you might need to become a member and pay for their resources. So it depends if you want free resources or you want paid resources. Generally, the paid ones do tend to give you more value. So if you've been through a lot of free resources and you're finding that you haven't got enough information to make a decision, then that's when you would move into paying for resources, which will give you more information to help you out.
So how do you make a medical writing portfolio if you have no bylines? Well, so bylines are basically your name on an article. So if someone publishes your work and it has written by Hassan, that's my byline on that piece. So if you don't have any bylines, but you have written stuff that's online, just ask permission from the client who you've written for and say, hi, do you mind if I use this as a portfolio piece? If not, you can actually use snippets of that piece and just to kind of show example that it is you've written it, but you can't maybe share the piece entirely. And you can just stick that on there. So if it's a ghostwriting project, you can just share snippets of the article that your potential clients might want to read. You can also write your own blog on your own website, and that doesn't require any bylines. It's your website. Everything that you've written there is you. And you can also reach out to different companies that will either give you the opportunity to be published in return for feedback or something. So, for example, as a Write Clinic, we offer starting medical writers the opportunity to get published in our blog. So, if you have any topics you want to write about, just let us know, and we'll go in there, we'll edit them, we'll upload them for you as well, and that could be used as one of your bylines. There are different companies such as Clarity and Geeky Medics that will always be open for healthcare professionals to kind of pitch in for articles, and they'll usually accept your pitch and get you writing something as soon as possible, and they'll give you bylines as well. So there are plenty of options out there. Just sort of ask around. You can also ask other medical writers on LinkedIn as well, like, how do you have any projects available that you can hand off to me? Like, is there anything that I can write for you? And obviously try not to ask for anything for free. Like, always make sure you do charge, because your time is worth something. But there are certain instances, like starting to make a portfolio, where it might be better, like having a testimonial and a byline actually might be worth more than whatever the article would cost you at the time. So only do it like 3 or 4 times max before stopping doing things for free, because you need to get paid as well.
So what skills do you need to get into freelance medical writing? Well, when people talk about skills, they normally talk about hard skills and soft skills. So hard skills are things that you have to know, and they are very tangible. So that means things like knowing how to use Microsoft Word or Google Docs or Microsoft Outlook in terms of emails, and also knowing how to research and how to cite or reference something. So those are hard skills that you definitely need as a medical writer. And as a soft skill, in contrast, that will be things like how well you communicate, how well you collaborate with a team, being on time, and being able to take on feedback. And also another soft skill is being creative. So you can't really, develop creativity. It's something that you tend to have and you tend to practice over time, and then you can get inspiration from things and then, creatively repurpose something. So having a mixture of hard skills and soft skills are what you need to be a freelance medical writer. But then also you need to be really persistent and persevere a lot as a freelance medical writer, because you will face rejection and it's going to be tough in the beginning. And we both went through it, me and Hass. So we are here now because we persisted, and we're continuing to live and work remotely because we are constantly looking for clients. So one of the biggest skills is definitely to keep on trying and keep on connecting with people and networking, and don't take rejection as a failure of your own. It just means that it wasn't the right time with that particular client, and there are loads of clients out there that you can reach out to make it work.
What is regulatory writing? Regulatory writing is quite a complex section of medical writing, because usually it involves writing the regulations for clinical trials or pharma companies and contract research organizations. This type of medical writing is usually more intricate. It requires a lot more time to kind of focus on it. It's very different from copywriting, because you're not writing anything to sell. You're writing to educate usually people within the same company. So when you do a clinical trial, you might need to have certain protocols or standard operating procedures, otherwise called SOPs. As a regulatory writer, you'd be expected to write those. As well, alternative, if you work with different medcoms agencies, you might be involved in running some promotional material for the pharma companies. So if it's a company that's releasing new medication, you might have to write the different advertising material for that medication, and that follows a lot of strict rules. So there are companies such as the ABPI and the PMCPA and MHRA in the UK anyway, and they kind of regulate what kind of content can go out. And as a regulatory writing, you have to produce promotional content in a copywriting style, but in a way that kind of matches all regulations, so that you're not going to have any legal implications in your writing. And that's when it gets pretty tough. But usually, whenever you find an associate role within a medcoms agency, they'll be teaching you all of this stuff, and they'll be sending you to appropriate courses so you become accredited in ABPI, PMCPA, PAGPA compliance, and you can go on that way. And that's a very sort of short overview of regulatory writing. I can go on and on, but it'll take quite a while, and I haven't done it myself in a little while. But that's what I got into initially as a medical writer as well.
So, can I work as a medical writer even if I am not a registered pharmacist? Yes, you can. So even if you're an undergraduate, you are a medical student, you are a doctor, nurse, dentist, vet, any kind of medical background will help you to stand out if you want to become a medical writer, because you have that healthcare knowledge and you may have that experience with patients hands-on in the clinic or in the pharmacy or wherever. So if you are a undergraduate student or you don't have a medical background and you want to get into it, it will be harder if you have no medical background at all, not even an undergraduate degree with a medical background. But you can still do it. So there are people who have English degrees, English literature. So one of my colleagues, Lucia, in my previous job, she got into the digital health world and now she's really interested in mental health, and that's what she writes about. And you can research a lot to become a medical writer. And as I said, you will be part of a team, so it's unlikely you'll just be writing on your own. And it's really important to research and reference if you haven't got that medical background, and also speak to people who do have a medical background. So you'll normally have a clinical review of your work. So you don't need to be a registered pharmacist to be a medical writer. It just so happens that me and Hass are both pharmacists, and we've got into medical writing because of our healthcare background.
If I have a medical degree and some writing experience, should I be applying to entry-level medical writing positions? And what job titles do these have? How do I find the best opportunities? if you have some writing experience, what I'd say, we've got a question there from Rebecca. Hi, Virginia has a specialist in therapeutic. I think we're going to answer your question throughout the presentation. I think your question is actually one of the questions we're answering, Rebecca. So we'll get to that as soon as we can. But to answer this one here on the screen, if you have a medical degree and some writing experience, you can try and apply for entry-level positions. These are usually called associate medical writer. However, it is always preferable that you have some sort of portfolio. So you want to demonstrate to your employer that you have some initiative in medical writing. So try, reaching out to companies such as us or such as Clarity or Geeky Medics and have a look at who you can write for, either for free or just for a small amount, just to get your name out there. Demonstrate that you have the skills to kind of, go out there, introduce yourself to people, and show that you actually know what certain aspects of medical writing are. So in medical writing, there are, there's like SEO, for example, which is quite a huge topic in medical writing. And when you work for different marketing agencies, you might really need to know about SEO. So showing that you've written an article that's very SEO heavy will actually, make it quite favorable for you to get hired. And how to find the best opportunities. I like to use LinkedIn jobs and I just touch in medical writer and then wherever you are, and then look for an associate medical writing position. Otherwise, you can use, LinkedIn, Twitter, as I said before. You can looking for a medical writer and see what people are posting. Or you can actually connect with different medcoms agencies and just say, hi, do you have any training roles available? Just even say I'm willing to do an internship. Bear in mind, if you're coming from the background of medicine, so if you're a doctor, your salary as an intern medical writer is going to be significantly less, and it's probably going to need you to be there full time. So what I always suggest to everyone is try and freelance on the side of being a doctor initially. Find out if you actually like the job, and then make the transition once you feel like that's okay and once you get the job. Because otherwise, there's quite a big salary difference. And if you have a mortgage or something, that's going to be quite hard to actually get into it.
Okay, next question is, I am a freelance medical writer and I am looking for a full-time position in the industry as a medical writer, but I do not know how to start. So as a freelance medical writer, you should be building up your portfolio. So if you have written for clients already, then make sure you are gathering samples of what you've written and getting a testimonial from your clients. So this is a really strong portfolio. And then you can find a recruiter that specializes in recruiting medical writers for whichever industry you're looking to get into. So let's say you are really interested in oncology and the pharma industry. So you can find a recruiter that specifically recruits medical writers for pharma clients that specialize in oncology medicines. So it really comes down to writing down exactly what you want and then searching for someone who can help you get there. And so networking, asking people if they know a recruiter, and also going direct to the websites and the companies that you want to work with and filling in their contact form or finding people that work there and connecting with them and having conversations, and also going to conferences as well. So being in person, if you can, is a really good place to start, because they will meet you in person and they can, have a real conversation with you that won't be limited on video or on email. So it's much more difficult to ignore you if you're standing right in front of them. So conferences have that advantage.
How stressful is it to be a medical writer? And if I'm not an English native, may I write review docs in English? Two different questions. I guess one can contribute to the other. Medical writing can be stressful. A lot of people we like to give off the fact that it's not stressful because obviously compared to being doctor, nurse, pharmacist, if compared to working in a hospital ward, it is not stressful. You're not directly relying on a patient's life in front of you. But at the same time, it's stressful if, say, for example, you're a freelancer and you're trying to find clients. The whole concept of finding clients can be very stressful because it's always on your mind. Who am I going to work with next? And even if you have some consistent income coming in, even if you have retainers, you never know what might happen to those retainers. So you're always thinking of, do I need to apply for another job straight away? So that's always in your head. That's always going to build up stress. You've also got deadline stress. So you'll be working with multiple clients at a time. Sometimes deadlines align in a way that you only have one thing to do at a time. but other times 3 clients might want the same, like an article on the same deadline. You're like, oh my God, okay, I have to get so much work done at the same time. So that's where it can be stressful. Sometimes clients can be annoying and very picky as well, because not all clients are writers. So sometimes they might write something that you think or know is good. You send it to the client, and the client really wants it in a particular way, so they'll send it back to you, and you kind of go back and forth. But remember, the client is always right, so everything you write, make sure it's done to the client's taste, and don't argue with them about like what you believe is better writing or not, because at the end of the day, that's what they're paying you for. It's their content for them to use. And if I'm not English native, yes, of course you can write and review docs in English. Given that your English proficiency is at pretty high standards, you need to be able to read and write English at the level of somebody who is native, just to make sure everything is legible. It doesn't matter where you come from. I'm not an English native. I was born in Iraq. I moved to the UK when I was 12. And there's and there's some fantastic medical writers out there who don't live in the UK or any other English-speaking countries, but are still fantastic writers. So it's just a matter of getting your English level up to scratch. And you can do that through various courses, reading more books, and just educating yourself online.
Hey, so how do you negotiate your fees or salary as a medical writer? So, if you are looking to employment as a medical writer, then that means you need to negotiate before you sign any contract to get the job and start the job, because your starting salary is going to be your main salary for the next 6 to 12 months. So it's going to be really hard to negotiate your salary beyond the first signing of the contract. So I'd recommend asking for about anywhere from 10 to 20% more than the initial offer. And then at least you'll get a few extra £1,000 more than the starting salary that they would have offered you, especially if they want to negotiate you down. In the UK, the average salary is somewhere between 40 and 55,000 for a medical writer full time. So that's 35 to 40 hours a week. If you are a freelance writer, then you again want to kind of speak to recruiters and see how much you should be charging. And I spoke to a recruiter recently, and they said, medical writers with a lot of experience are charging between £55 and £65 per hour. So that means if you are entry level, you should definitely be charging around £30 per hour, or a bit more. And we're recording this in 2023. So when I started a few years ago, I was charging £25 per hour. So you definitely want to be charging more than that now, especially because of inflation and things. So speak to other people to ask what's reasonable if you're looking for an hourly rate. But the most important thing is to work out how much money you need to survive and then ask for that money. So if you want to work a 40-hour work week and you want to have enough money to cover your rent, your food expenses, and then anything extra, such as spending on a holiday or clothing, then actually work that out and then add an extra 30% for taxes and figure out what your hourly rate would be as a minimum and make sure that you get that. You can either charge your client hourly or you can charge them as a project rate. So if your client wants a really big project and you know that that project is going to take up 25 hours per week of your time, then you should calculate how much that 25 hours is worth and then times that by 4, and that will be the monthly project rate. So it's really important to do your maths to make sure that the amount of money you want is the amount of money that you get. So it's not about trying to charge the highest number possible, but trying to get a fair salary so that you can live off your work.
So how do you structure your day as a medical writer? This one varies, depends entirely on you and how you like to write and how you like to spend your day. Some people like to work 40-hour work weeks, so they'll spend their days working as if they were in an office. So they'll start at 9 a.m., finish at 5:30 p.m., and they'll set very strict times, and that's if that works for you, then fantastic. Other people like myself who kind of get used to the freedom of being a freelance writer and want to work whenever and wherever, will probably do some more sporadic kind of style writing. If I wake up early, I like to work for like a couple of hours in the morning, maybe go to the gym, relax, and then work a few more hours in the afternoon/evening. And then sometimes if I can't sleep, I'll actually do some more work like at 10, 11 p.m. if I just can't sleep and I'm bored. So it completely depends. I also like to work on weekends sometimes, especially on a rainy day like today, and there's not much to do. I'll happily have my laptop there and do a couple of hours because I don't actually work, 8 to 10 hours a day during the week. I'll probably work like more 4 to 5. So I don't mind spending an extra couple of hours on a weekend, particularly if I wake up early and if it's raining and there's nothing else to do. Um, so that all depends. But if you're a full-time writer, you'll be expected to work set hours as promised by your company. So whether that be in the office or remotely at home, you'll be expected to be online for certain hours just to be available for calls, etc. So your day will just be structured as a normal 9 to 5. Benefit of being a freelancer is that you can go to the gym whenever you want. You can have your food whenever you want. You can snack whatever you want, wherever you want. So no one's there to stop you doing anything. Whereas obviously, if you're working in an office, it's like you have to find a set time to go have a coffee, for example, or have a chat with somebody, or take a phone call, go to the gym. So it just depends on what you like and how you like your day structured.
So, what health topics did you first write about, and how did you progress to where you are today? So, in terms of picking something to write about, which I think aligns with Rebecca's question earlier, which is, do you need to specialize in a specific therapeutic area, or can you work across a range of topics? So, I would say in the beginning, if you haven't got a portfolio or anything, then pick something that you know a lot about and you're an expert in. Even though it might not feel like you're an expert in it, just go for it. So, for me, that was travel health. And I was working full time as a pharmacist for 7 years. And in 5 years of that, I was also working as a travel health clinic and vaccinations expert. And so I wrote about travel health advice. So I would write articles about rabies or Japanese encephalitis. And I used that as my portfolio, and that landed me a job with an online doctor through Upwork. And they wanted me to write all of the pages for their travel health section. So things like malaria and jet lag. And I progressed to where I am today by writing for a variety of different things. So it was still in the online doctor niche, if you like, but then also for hospitals, also for mental health. So if you can prove that you can take a topic and write well about it, then you build up your portfolio in that topic, but then it also is kind of evidence that you can concentrate in one area and do it really well, and then you can be introduced to another area and also do that really well. So when I had my previous job in digital health, I hadn't written anything at all about digital health. I was literally thrown in at the deep end. I didn't know anything about digital health assessments or health apps. I'd never really looked into it. And so it was an amazing opportunity to learn. But because they had seen that my writing has been successful in other topics, they were willing to take me on, and also the way that I work with them with good communication. So the soft skills definitely came into play, and the ability to be creative as well on social media. So you can pick at the very beginning something that you will mainly write about to build your portfolio, and then expand into other topics. So you don't need to be constantly writing about the same thing all the time. And you can switch to different industries, different specialisms. And it's a great way to learn. And it's also a great way to keep things interesting, to write about a variety of things.
So how can I continue developing my medical writing skills even after being a professional? Writing is always expanding, so like I'm learning new ways to write every day. If I look at my pieces that I wrote like about a year ago, that'd still be very different to the pieces I write today because my writing style just changes over time, and that probably comes from reading articles. Just when you become a medical writer, you become more inclined to actually read. I sign up to more newsletters. I actually have more interest reading certain medical journals or medical articles. If I see anything in the news that's medical, I'd be more interested in reading it. So over time, my writing skills just kind of change. So your writing skills will always keep developing, even while being a writer. And usually, if you're a professional, if you're working in an agency, you're usually working with an editor, and the editor usually give you feedback every time you write. So whenever you get your pieces back, every time you submit a piece, you're actually going to be learning more and more because the editor will be changing things up and down, crossing things out, adding things in, and you'll be able to notice like, oh, okay, I can see they've added in here. Probably shouldn't be writing this way. And then eventually it'll stick with you, and that's how you write it from then on. So you're always going to be learning as a medical writer, which is why it's such a fantastic job, because you're always learning something new.
So, with a life sciences, not medical background, how can I convince the interviewer that I can succeed as a medical writer, including things like medical jargon, knowledge, etc.? So, again, I would go back to the soft skills that can set you apart. So, creativity, good communication, having proof in terms of evidence of a portfolio. So, that's how you can convince the interviewer. So, if you get to the interview stage and they're still not convinced, then show them your portfolio or talk about who you've worked with in terms of clients in order to create those pieces in your portfolio. And also talk about what you read. So if you have friends who are healthcare professionals or you read medical journals and you understand medical jargon and all of the knowledge around it, then make sure that you evidence that. So say, yeah, I'm a subscriber to this magazine, or I've read this book by this person who knows a lot about sleep, or I listen to this podcast where they talk a lot about this and it's hosted by this doctor and that doctor who have a PhD in sleep or something. So you can demonstrate your interest and your knowledge by saying what you listen to gather your knowledge and your medical kind of jargon familiarity, because they'll probably have got you to the interview stage because they like something on your CV. They already like you at this point. So you just need to push the point that you are constantly learning and developing your knowledge from high authority, credible sources.
What is the best way to start and display your medical writing portfolio? The best way to start is to just jump right in, have a look around. So Upwork, as I said before, have a flick through Upwork. Even if you don't have any writing experience, you can always just pitch your experience in healthcare, which is what I did. So if you're of a healthcare background or life sciences, in your pitch, just highlight exactly what you've done in healthcare, why it's going to be beneficial for the client. And you have to keep applying. You're not going to get the first job you apply for on Upwork. I think I invested $20 of my own money into buying connects, which are like the currency that you buy projects with. And I used pretty much like $16 of worth of connects before I landed the first role. But obviously the first article I wrote actually paid for those connects. And then that client ended up being with me for 30 months. So I built up quite a big portfolio using that. You can also, as I said before, reach out to some people like Geeky Medics, Clarity, or Right Clinic, and anyone else that'll be willing to kind of like give writers feedback in return for an article to post on their blog with their byline. So just keep asking about and seeing who's willing to give you some work to actually display. You can also set up your own blog if no one is willing, or if you don't know how to find anyone else, to set up your own blog. So you can start a WordPress website, or you can start you got a Medium and use those links to kind of demonstrate your writing. And in terms of displaying your portfolio, you can use some free platforms such as Journal Portfolio, or you can even use Canva, have a little Google Doc, and just have links to different portfolio pieces because they're all free. Or else, if you want to, invest in your website, you can just make your own website in WordPress or Wix, and have a page that is your portfolio that links back to certain pieces.
And also your LinkedIn profile, you have a featured section, so use it.
Right, true. I forgot about that.
No worries. So, what are the tools and programs you use to facilitate your work as a medical writer and finish it with high quality and with the lowest efforts? So, I think it would be nice to create high quality content with low effort, and it's just not. I don't think it's possible unless you have already put in a lot of effort to create a template, and then in future you can reuse that template. So that would be, if you're putting in the hard work up front, then that will make your future work easier. So I would say tools and programs that I use tend to be definitely Canva for anything design, or Carousel like for social media. I use CapCut and Filmora for editing videos. I use Word and Google, so Microsoft Word and Google Docs for writing. And then I often save things as a PDF if it needs to go off to someone. And in terms of the lowest effort, I would say structures are really important. So again, going back to having a template or framework. So it's really important to use proper headings in your work before you start writing anything. So make sure you have an actual title and then your H2 headings, your H3 headings underneath. And so H1, H2, and H3 headings are how the internet figures out, or Google rather, what your article or work is about if you're publishing on the internet. When it comes to articles that are going to be in a magazine or printed or a journal, then that has a different structure. So always make sure that if you want your work to be high quality, that you definitely follow the brief. And if they do give you a template or rules that authors have to follow, then you follow those rules and you double check your work to make sure that it's high quality at the end. And again, if you work with a client long enough, then it'll be less effort to produce work for them. So that's why the beginning negotiation of fees should be try to get what you need, first of all, if not a little bit extra. And then as you become more efficient, you can ask for more because you are taking less time to complete the work.
And there's tools like Hemingway, Grammarly, etc. that will kind of help with your writing in general. So if you are like me and forget about full stops, random different bits of grammar, Grammarly, Hemingway, those kind of tools will just pick it up for you. So kind of, it stops your brain from worrying about that for a little while.
Yeah, I forgot that. Thank you for mentioning that. I use them all the time, but I think they just become like background noise. You just, so yeah, that definitely takes out some effort from the editing.
Most job postings ask for medical writing experience. Does freelancing count? Yes, it does. Freelancing experience is very good, especially if you freelance for medcoms agencies. A lot of freelance medical writing jobs are for medcoms agencies. So whenever they say you have experience, you could say, yes, I freelance for one of your competitors. So I know exactly how a medcoms agency would work. And I know what kind of style of work that you do and what you expect from me. So yes, freelancing does indeed count, no matter what kind of freelancing experience you have. It's all experience, and that all counts towards you finding a job.
So, guidelines for writing styles in medical writing. So, there are lots of different styles for medical writing depending on the type of medical writing. So, there's a big difference between the writing style for publication in a journal and then for social media. So, because I'm more of an expert in social media, then I would say there's the NHS health content guidelines and also the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges, or the AOMRC guidelines. And those are being held, kind of in high regard if, for example, you want to get your YouTube verification badge as part of the YouTube health program now, if you're a health content creator for a health organization, or if you are a healthcare professional and you're creating video content. So I think there are other styles in terms of, even how you reference and cite all of the resources that you use. And what it really comes down to in terms of guidelines is asking your client what they want you to do. So a lot of clients will have a style guide for their own brand, and they'll have certain catchphrases or key messaging that they want you to include, especially when it comes to, what do you call the brand itself? So do you call it, for example, Boots, or do you call it Boots the Chemist or Boots the Pharmacy? How do you actually write that? And when it comes to different styles, you'll also develop your own style as well. So if you are writing for a patient audience, it also depends on the tone of voice that the client wants you to write in. So they might want you to be really friendly and enthusiastic and happy, or they might want you to be really empathetic and solemn. And, you might be dealing with a sensitive issue that the person who's going to be reading your work will be thinking about while they're reading. So there's lots of different ways that you can approach writing styles in medical writing, and I think you really need to have that detailed in a brief before you start writing anything for your client.
So how to get medical writing clients on LinkedIn properly. I briefly went over this before. So there's, you think, 3 or 4 main ways. So the first one is using the search bar and looking for terms about, looking for a medical copywriter. They're connecting with people who own different marketing agencies that specialize in medicine and medical products, and just interacting with them, introducing yourself to them, and seeing if they need a freelance writer. Obviously, don't overdo it. Don't burden somebody in the DMs. Just message them and introduce yourself, and then if they want to work with somebody, they'll get back to you. Don't just keep messaging and pestering someone, because that's going to be it's going to turn them off working for you. So with you. So yeah, don't go overboard with it, and don't just straight out cold pitch them. So introduce yourself. Hi, I'm a freelance writer. Just wanted to put myself on your radar. I just wanted to follow your work, and then after like maybe 2 weeks, you'd be like, hi, I saw you've been posting this on your case study. Have you got any more projects like this that you need any more help with? If not, that's fine. Just let me know. And then go on from there. You can also just network with people in general in the same industry. A lot of the jobs I get is just people tagging me in comments, being like, "Oh, I know Hassan. He's in medical writing." So they might see it post, and then they might be like, "Oh, I know somebody who might help." And I've had one client through that way as well, so it's just pretty handy. And then you can use different like medical writing groups as well. So on our group, for example, people always put up jobs that they see. So have a look at the different groups and see what are available. And that's, I'd say, the four main ways of finding a medical writing client on LinkedIn.
So, is it a good idea to specialize in a certain niche, such as regulatory writing or academic content, etc.? So, I would say give yourself the space to breathe, especially in the beginning, to try lots of different things. And you can include very specific work in specific portfolios. So you can have multiple portfolios if you'd like. So, one where you have all of your academic content, or all of your social media content, or all of your blogs and website content. So, again, give yourself space to breathe and do a variety of different types of content and see which one you like best, and then choose if you want to specialize in doing that. And then once you have written enough, then you can always switch. So there's no loyalty in medical writing. It's the clients that you find and what they need.
And by the way, you don't always have to specialize. Like my thing's mental health and men's health. I'd say I've only got one men's health client right now. The rest are just very different and varied from different industries. So niching does help, but at the same time, like don't limit yourself to jobs. If you don't have many clients, feel free to branch out.
Yeah.
What are the legal implications we should think of in medical writing? This probably is mostly geared towards regulatory writing and promotional material for pharma companies. Obviously, if you're writing for patients for a different publication, usually there'll be an editor and a doctor that will proofread your work. So, if you're writing anything that's for patients, just make sure it is accurate and information that you're writing is not going to harm somebody. So if you're, talking about, kidney disease and you talk about minimizing water intake, which is, sometimes wrong, you might end up doing somebody more harm. They might read that and think, "Oh, I'm drinking too much water." Obviously, I'm just speaking out of my head here. That's not that I should be writing it at all. But if something like that could be a legal implication, especially if your editor misses it. Promotional materials. There are certain phrases you can't use when advertising in medicine, such as like this is the best in doing this, or comparing something to another drug, or just making it sound you're promoting a drug in a way that you might have seen in America. If you've seen a new Netflix documentary called Painkiller, it's a perfect example of what not to do in terms of advertising. So all that stuff has legal implications that might, subject a company to go under the MHRA and be sentenced to court. This is why you might use some medical writing insurance. So there are different companies. I use Policy B, and it's like £10 a year, but it covers you for anything that might happen, which is very rare. But some clients might ask you for insurance anyway, just to make sure that it's safe.
So, advice for non-English native speakers who want to get into medical writing. So, me and Hass are both not native. We both were born in different countries and then moved to the UK and learned English as a second language. So my English is definitely not perfect, and I'm still learning every day. I'm reading, I'm, writing, I'm getting feedback. And I think if you are a non-English native speaker, then I would say brush up on your English skills and do the courses. So if you are trying to get to, normally there's a scale of like A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. So normally if you're about a B1 or a B2, you tend to be good enough to write as a medical writer. And some companies might require that you are C1 or C2, but I think that's a big ask because most English people who are native don't even know C1, C2 English. So I would say if you read up a lot and you research a lot about a specific topic, then you can prove that you know the English and language of that specific topic. So again, going back to kind of specializing, if English is not your first language or native language, then prove that you know the language because of what you read, what you subscribe to, and don't limit yourself again to one topic. So you can learn the English and you can be just as good. So don't let that hold you back. Apply anyway. And if they still judge you by your English, your spoken English, but not by your written English, then maybe you shouldn't work for them. So focus on writing well.
Can we get into medical writing as a part-time while being a practicing doctor? Yes, that's how you should get into medical writing. You should never leave your job and go straight to medical writing, because sometimes it might not be for you, and then you just missed out on a very good job that you may have had. So as a doctor or any healthcare professional, first of all, find the time. You're going to be very busy as a doctor. If you're working 9 till 9, do not go back and do some medical writing on the side. Do not burn yourself out. Although you're trying to escape medical writing so you can avoid burnout, don't burn yourself out in the meantime, because you're going to start despising both. So on a, I say, quiet day, and by quiet I mean getting home at a reasonable hour, then you can invest maybe half an hour of that day to kind of learn more about medical writing. So that could be doing a chapter of a course, or trying to start an article or start a blog, and do that over time. It might take you a few months. It took me about 6 to 8 months to actually get into it full time properly. So just give yourself some time and do it on the side, and eventually you can start charging, and you can replace locoming with medical writing on the side. And once that medical writing freelance starts picking up and earning more money, then you can start considering switching completely from medicine to medical writing. But yes, you could definitely get into it as while being a doctor, and that's how we urge you to do it as well.
So can we get into, oh, sorry. So can you briefly discuss the different medical documents that medical writers are involved in developing? So it depends on what your client wants, but normally they are medical regulatory documents if you go into pharma. So those are very specific documents that might talk about the clinical trial results and the evidence behind the medicine that you're trying to get approved. So I'm not an expert in these types of documents, and I would recommend looking more into regulatory writing where this is more relevant. And yeah, I'm not afraid to say that I don't know something that I don't have experience in, because I don't want to pretend that I know, because it would not be helpful information for you. So have you got any ideas about medical documents that medical writers help develop?
So it's got a lot. So there's obviously clinical trial protocols. There's your SOPs, and then there's white papers. You've got blueprints. You've got advertorials, which are sort of like a press release in a way that can advertise a certain product or certain new technology that the company is using. And then if you're writing for patients, it'll be brochures, it'll be patient information leaflets. If you're writing towards healthcare professionals, there'll be educational material surrounding the use of a new medication and applications of a new medication. It could be posters. It could be something that's going to be used in a conference, like a massive banner that says, "Oh, come look at us and read up what we do." Blogs, articles, website copy, website content, social media content. There's a whole load, so you're never going to be bored. And usually, when you work with a mid-coms agency, you'll have a mix of everything, so it's actually quite fun. And you don't feel like you need to, pick your brains up, because there are different things you can write about.
Yeah, and normally your client will give you guidance on what they want in the document if it's something that's regulatory, and you'll get a brief if it's something that is kind of, I'll say, lighter work, but not as technical. So things like social media and blogs. So what are the main skills I need? Yeah. What are the main skills I need to highlight in my CV? So the main skills you need to highlight are where you have been successful in your project. So I'm not a fan of people listing skills like good communicator or good teamwork or good person who works by themselves. So I would say speaking to your experience on your CV is more valuable than just listing a collection of skills, because anyone can just list skills. But if you have the experience to back up the evidence behind, proving that you have those skills, then I would recommend you do that instead. And again, hard skills, I would say all the programs that you know how to use. So even things like Slack or Zoom or Teams or Google Meet. So these communication platforms, but also even obvious things like Microsoft Office. So you do need to put those down because they need to know if you can use them, because that's the software that you'll be working with every single day. And soft skills, and in terms of soft skills, you can demonstrate that by saying, you created a campaign where you helped brief a designer, or you wrote certain blogs and it got more traffic. And then, you took that data and then you created another blog out of it. So that's some kind of strategy, some kind of creativity behind that. And I would say get someone to look at your CV after you complete it so they can get a real impression of who you are, and then give you advice on how to improve it. But generally, your CV is like the first thing people will see. And sometimes if you have the opportunity to, then, include a link of yourself talking on video, because it gives you a bit of personality as well. So there are some requests now to include a video of yourself in your CV and your portfolio as well. So your portfolio is another massive demonstration of your skills.
Any particular courses to take? Do I need experience in content creative writing, and what are the career paths available? I think we've already answered the last two of those questions, but there are plenty of courses out there for you to take. One of them being the fundamentals of medical writing, the course that we have created on Write Clinic, which goes over everything we have just gone over and more, and it gives you the right skills that you need and the information that you need to actually get started as a freelancer or as a full-time medical writer, and help you build up your career from start to finish. And we'll be there all along the way as well to help you out in any way possible.
And this is a picture of where we first met in person. So even though we met online, we then finally met in person in London at Nando's. So this is a picture of us in Nando's in London last year. Wow, it's been a long time.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're overdue an in-person meetup, Has. So I think there are lots of different paths you can take, and if you want to get creative or experience a type of content, a great way is to just try and create it yourself, and look at how-to videos of how things are made, and then just give it a go. You'll learn more from practically doing something than just reading about it.
Like we said, Fundamentals of Medical Writing course is now live, and we've repriced it, we've rebranded it, and now it's actually only £450 for access to the entire course, and that can be paid for in full or paid for as three monthly payments of £150.
And if you'd like, you can also add on top of that as a bonus, so 3 coaching calls with us. So one-to-one with either myself or Has, and they are £50 each. So it's not £150 times 3, it's £50 each for 3 coaching calls, and you buy it as a package. So 3 times 50 is 150, and you can pick a 1-hour time slot times 3 for a time that suits you. And this is valid if you buy the course before the 31st of October. So once you bought the course, we will be notified, and then we'll send you an email to say if you'd like to get 3 coaching calls as a package for £150.
So there's not much long left on this offer, because obviously once the time frame ends, we're gonna bring up the price again. So if you do want some coaching now, and if you want to get started now, because now is always the best time to start, then let us know. I will send you all the links that you need, and all the links can be found on our website and on our LinkedIn. That's just the price as we just said before.
Yeah, so if you want to get started today, you can go to the Right Clinic website, which is rightclinic.com, and then choose Fundamentals of Medical Writing in the courses section, and select the payment plan that's right for you. So either pay in full at £450, or you can pay £150 per month for 3 months. And if you want the coaching call package, which is £150 for 3 calls, which are 1 hour each, then we will email you to offer that if you buy the course before the 31st of October, and then complete the course at your own pace. So you will get the opportunity to create assignments, and that includes creating a portfolio, your CV, a resume, a cover letter, even your website, your LinkedIn. So we will look at pretty much everything that you create on your journey to becoming a medical writer and give you direct feedback. You can ask as many questions as you like. And all of the videos are really short, little bite-sized videos. And you can also access the course through the Thinkific app. So if you want to just listen and do something else at the same time on your phone, then you can. And we have spent a lot of time creating this course and put a lot of love into it. So if it is something that you're interested in, then do give it a go.
So thank you all so much. I think we've just gone past the hour mark, and I'm sure some of you want to go back to your weekends. So just remember, our previous webinar is now live on our YouTube channel. The link can be found on our LinkedIn. And we can post the link again today if you guys need it to. So thank you all so much for attending.
Yeah, thank you so much, and have a fantastic weekend. Follow us on LinkedIn and at Right Clinic on YouTube to see more about what we do and information on medical writing. So thank you so much. Bye.